to the Health and Social Care Business Podcast. In this second segment, we will still be speaking on the autism spectrum disorder, but this time from the perspective of how service providers and carers can create a more wholesome experience for individuals living with this disorder. Joining us today is Charlotte Dick, who has taken on the role as an advocate in autism, as a mother with 2 sons on the autism spectrum. She plays an active part in her community, reaching out to parents from minority groups with children with special needs to access services and provide supports. We are very excited to have you on here, Charlotte. Thank you so much.
Hi, good evening, Obi. Thank you for having me today. It's an honour to be asked or invited to a podcast.
So Charlotte, I know that you're the director of Black Women in Care, and this is a community of Black women and healthcare providers that come together to discuss issues and share best practices within the health and social care sector. So from your experience, what are the biggest challenges faced by health and social care providers and carers who support autistic individuals?
Is the understanding of what that actually means in real life. So, I think there's lots of training and people complete, mandatory training, but speaking to people, even just recently, a lot of people are, they're scared. I think they're scared of the unknown. They go on train, hear about, autism, and because autism is such a vast spectrum, it can be anything. No person with autism is the same. So you meet one person with autism and that's one person with autism. There are, certain characteristics that are similar, but they are very, very, different individually. So people, I think, find it difficult when they're looking at supporting, providing care packages, making sure that they are doing, the right thing. Also, if you're dealing with somebody with autism, you might not have those skills to communicate with them if they're not verbal. And people say, well, how do I communicate with them? And I see, you've got to work with the family.
Yeah.
And sit down, speak to them, especially when you're doing the assessment. So I would say being on the receiving end of having, carers for, having respite for my children is I'm looking at when that provider comes to my home to do, and they are fully clued up, they know what they're doing, and they're open and honest, be transparent.
Yeah.
I think that's the biggest, it will be a letdown if you're not. And I always say to people, if you don't know, say you don't know, because the likelihood is that that person is going to say to you, I will tell you how to support my child or my brother or my father, or whoever it is. But yeah, I think it is that it's the unknown. People are worried and concerned.
And then to mitigate that, communication with the parents and open and as a parent yourself, it's actually quite nice to hear it from you, because if you're saying that service providers who provide services, if they're open and honest and just engage with parents like yourself, it goes a long way than trying to implement an e-learning mandatory training that you haven't yet implemented. So it's still trial and error, and you're still trying to make sense of how you're going to implement it. And then that makes you feel scared because you haven't done it before. But openness, transparency, it's a long way to deal with any concerns that you have as a service provider. So thank you for that. So Charlotte, you advocate for individuals living with autism. So what are your insights on bridging the gap between families and healthcare providers to ensure a smooth transition into adulthood for autistic individuals? You're probably going to be very well placed to talk about this because of your son, right?
So I guess with the 16, so I've got a 16-year-old and an 8-year-old son. Both of them have autism.
This is just an area I'm sure you're dealing with right now. So it's exciting to hear what your thoughts are.
Yeah, so my lived experience, you're right. You're getting it at the right at the moment when I'm becoming very stressed out.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, so the problem is that healthcare and social care, your child transitions at different times. I think it's social care transition happens at 17, and healthcare happens at 18. So we've got 2 different kind of transitions to kind of coordinate. and the services are like a shock to the system.
Wow.
When I say that, it means that all that kind of wraparound support, or lack of it sometimes, that wraparound support ends. And as you go into adulthood, there's a lot less services and a lot less support. I think for, the individual with autism, so my son, I'm talking about my 6-year-old, wouldn't have a clue what that means or how that would impact on him. So for him, the likelihood is he wouldn't really notice, but I will. So the person who's the carer, I will definitely notice. So things like hospital appointments or speech and language therapy or occupational therapy, he won't have access to that as he does now, because he'll go from children's services to adult services. And they don't have that kind of input. Even when we're talking about social care or having short breaks or hours or social care respite, that also changes because you're going from children to adults, and then they you're not entitled to as many hours. Services are really cut down because you're going to a different budget. So for the family, it can be quite a stressful time. And thinking about that. So I would say, if you're a provider, it would be, if you have the knowledge about that child or that, going into that transition phase, is making sure you're there and supporting the family, letting them know to prepare themselves for, that transition. So it's not just a shock. Also, looking at things like mental capacity, because that changes, benefits change, they go from DLA to PIP, personal independent payment, and also they're expected to be able to advocate for themselves. So there's lots of legal changes as well. So if you can support, that would be great.
That's really good advice, especially for service providers who have supported individuals in adulthood. It's really good to prepare the parents so it's not a shock to their system, like you've said. Okay, so what are some effective strategies for collaborating with carers to ensure consistency in the application of therapy approaches for autistic children?
So I would say that so for somebody who isn't trained in kind of providing therapy, and I think it's a bit daunting when you think about therapy. What does that mean? And therapy can mean a range of things. So we could be talking about something like speech and language therapy. It doesn't mean you have to be a qualified speech and language therapist, but that speech and language therapist has put in a plan for you. Yeah, exactly. So when you're doing that plan, it could be anything. So making sure that you are using a picture exchange card. So I don't know if you've seen those little pictures.
PECs.
Yeah, exactly. So using that on a daily basis to check off a schedule. So this having a daily reminder of things that you're going to do, making sure that you are prompting that child to look at it every time they're going to brush their teeth, you're going to wash your face, you're taking it down, you put it in. All of that is part of therapy. So I would make sure that you're coordinating, you're speaking with the family. You're speaking with the family and making sure that you are doing the same as what they're doing. So consistency is key. There'll be a range of different things that will have to be done. I wouldn't say that you're going to have to apply them, but every child is so different. And children with autism also are more likely to have comorbidities. So they could have other things that they might need interventional therapy for, so physiotherapy, etc. So it's really important that you follow. And sometimes, more often than not, is that the family will say to you, okay, I've got the physio coming in today. I want you to be around so you can know what to do, like the stretches with that child, or maybe exercises when you come round, if you give them a bath after a bath or whatever it may be. So it's really making sure that that's written into their care plan when they're doing that assessment initially. And if anything changes, it's important for the carer to let the provider know or the agency know.
Yeah.
So if they're that only point of communication between the two.
So for carers and care providers out there, it's not your duty to create the plans. It's the duty of either the occupational therapist, speech and language therapist, but then you take that plan and then you implement. So
That,
that collaborative working is key in that. And then also, as the carer is a person who constantly has access to the individual, feedback is also paramount, especially to improve and constantly review the plans written by the professional. So to wrap up, the Oliver McGowan mandatory training and the positive behavioral support approach are significant steps forward to caring for autistic individuals. How can we further improve the implementation of training for carers working with autistic individuals?
so I think the one thing with training is if you don't use it, you lose it. So even if you do mandatory training and you've done it, a couple of years ago, and then you've then come across somebody who's autistic, and then you've completely forgotten. I would say go back, review your training, but also speak to the family, speak to the individual, make sure you read up on that person's care plan. If it's a child, I would say the really good training, or how you're going to understand that individual, is reading through their EHCP, which I mentioned before, so the education
healthcare plan.
And that's going to give you all of that individual's needs. So it's going to list every single need. So it's every single professional that's had an input into that plan. So you've got speech and language, you've got OT, you've got an educational psychologist, you might have a psychiatrist, a consultant. You've got loads of people that's had an input. So they are updated annually. So they usually, quite current. Not lots changing it, but you would get a good idea of where that person is. So don't just go into a home or whatever setting you are in to look after or support somebody with autism or any special need without having a look and reading up, speaking to the person who knows them best. I think that's the best training you could get as a carer, saying what does that person like, what is their needs. The most important thing is how do they communicate. Always make sure that you involve that person. Don't ignore them, don't speak over them, because a lot of people don't understand that or appreciate that even though somebody's not verbal doesn't mean that they don't have any understanding. A lot of the time they do understand. So it's important to make sure that you're speaking to them, and you make sure that you communicate, or ensure that they can communicate their needs to you in the way that they communicate, whether that's using picture cards, or whether that's writing it down, or whether that's using basic sign language. So just ensure that you're working with that person and you know their needs.
That's brilliant. And the best way to do that is to look at the education and healthcare plan. So the EHP, would that be accessible to carers, or is it a document that the service provider has to use to create the care plan?
So what I usually do, and I'd say is good practice. So yes, so the service provider will have that. They should be requesting it from the parent. If it's a child under 8 or under 25 years old, if it's a person under 25 years old, they'll have one. And I would be encouraging carers to read up on that if it's they're going to support that person. It is a very long document and it might be quite difficult to understand. So I'd say it's about just summarizing it and taking out the most kind of pertinent, the most important points, and listing those down for the carer. Because I'm realistic. There's no way a carer has time to read through that whole document.
Of course.
It's about the provider that's the provider's responsibility to make sure that they've put it in a format that is easily accessible for the carer, which means that if they're going into this person, I can look at this, I know how this person communicates, I know what this person's physical needs are, I know what this person's personal needs are, what their wishes are. Those, making sure that you've got that just in kind of bullet points and summarize it for them. Because I always ask, so I'm a parent, so don't come to me. I'm a parent that kind of tests you to see if you know my child before you come there. I'm not trying to be horrible, I'm not trying to catch anybody out,
Of
but
course.
I want to know how much I'm trusting you with my child.
Yeah.
You've read up on this child that you're coming to, and made sure that you know a little bit about this child. If you come and you have no knowledge at all, I then tell them to go back I can send them the EXCP. It is obviously, we're talking about data protection, so I don't advise people to go ahead and do this, but I will always make sure the service provider has that. And I'll say to them, go back, access that, and, you know, read up a little bit about my children so you know what they're like. And then, you know, we can go from there, because it means a lot to the parent when you've taken the time to do that. And then they trust you with their children. So, yeah.
Yeah, I've worked in a home care setting, and I've had to create care plans, and I have used a EHP. It's very comprehensive, and it's one of the best documents available out there to create or to use to create a comprehensive, personalized care plan. So I would encourage any service provider out there who doesn't request it to do so, because like you said, it's a document written by multiple professionals, multidisciplinary teams, and it's the most comprehensive document you're probably going to get, because even when you go for your initial assessments, the one-to-one, there usually isn't enough time, or the parent doesn't remember everything they need to. So it's a supporting document that could be used to create a comprehensive and person-centered care plan. So on that note, we would like to hear some words of wisdom, some final words of support to families who are supporting individuals with ASD. We'd like to end the podcast on a lighter note. So what would you like to say to families out there, carers, service providers, everybody in the autistic community or ASD community?
So, you know, I would like to probably say, especially for a carer, or when I talk about carer, I talk about unpaid carer, or a, you know, parent of somebody with autism, is you're not alone. Your feelings are valid. It's not an easy journey. It is very challenging at times. You have your ups, you have your downs. I definitely do. People say, you know, you're so strong, and, you know, you're doing so well. You've got 2 children with autism, and, you know, you look great. And I don't know how you expect me to look. You know, this is me, and that my children have made me who I am. Honestly,
oh, that's awesome.
I don't think I would be where I am today. I know I wouldn't be where I am today without my children. They have helped me to grow. I have learned from them, and I think the most important thing that you can do is to change it into a positive. There are days that you are not going to want to do anything, and you have to fight. You will have to fight. Anybody that's just joining or starting their journey, I'm not going to sugarcoat it. You fight every single day for what's right for your child, but you fight because it will mean that they will have the best future possible, and they will be as independent as possible, and that's all you can strive for. So I'd say anybody, and we're talking about professionals or providers or carers, is to support that family as much as you can. Even if you don't know, signpost. A lot of the times people just want somebody to, you know, be that listening ear. I'd say especially when you have somebody like a carer coming in, and you're that person to have kind of the conversation with the parent if they've not had any adult conversation all day, or they've been having, you know, really rubbish day, they're feeling overwhelmed. I know sometimes if I have a, you know, carer come in, and, you know, we're speaking, I've come to take my, you know, son out or something for respite, and it's just nice to just, you know, have a conversation that's probably, you know, about nothing, but it's just, you know, just you know, be there. It's okay not to be okay. Reach out.
I like that one.
Don't have silence. And, you know, I'm always here. I'm always talking to parents on social media, etc. But yeah, I'm always honest. I'm not. I still have a cry. And, you know, when days are difficult, but it's you know, that's okay, and I'm honest about it.
Thank you so much, Charlotte, for your time. Thank you for sharing your insights and experiences with us today. Your dedication to providing the best care possible for autistic individuals is truly inspiring. And to anyone who is listening, whether you're a service provider or a service user, we hope you'll be eager to implement some of these key takeaways in your work and your family's lives. Thank you.